Hey, how's everyone doing today? Today we're going to be learning how to make a much more realistic starry sky than in my last video. We're going to be learning a lot of cool concepts, including how to layer galaxies across the sky, how to procedurally generate stars, unlike using a particle system which we used in my last video, and we're going to learn a thing or two about parallax and making things that are not as far away seem much farther. So let's jump right in. You want to start with your default scene. My default scene set up to already delete the default cube. But you want to just go ahead and delete everything in the scene. We're going to be adding back a camera later. So let's first start by working on the actual starry background. So we're going to have 3 layers. We're going to have a background of stars, and we're going to make that look hopefully pretty realistic. Then we're going to add a big galactic arm, like from the Milky Way, for example, across the middle, and then I'm going to show you how to add smaller galaxies, as many as you want, whatever kind you want, however you'd like, wherever you'd like. There's a lot of customization that goes into this method. But first, let's start with the generic starry background. So I'll pull open another pane so we can pull up a node editor. Go to the node editor, and we're going to start editing the background. And we want to see what we're working on. So hit Shift-Z with your mouse hovering over the viewport, and you want to hit T to get rid of this toolbar off to the side here. And now we've got a nice view to the viewport, and of course nothing's going on because we haven't edited anything yet. But we're going to. So in your node editor, down here on this bottom panel, switch to the world node editor, and we're going to use nodes. Alright, let's take a look at what we got. First of all, sky. Night sky generally tends to be black. So let's lower the color all the way down to black, and you can actually make this like a very dark blue if you want to be super realistic, but I'm going to make it black because when I did my renders it just came out nicer when it was black. Yeah, and you want to probably save before you lose everything. Okay, so now the way we're going to procedurally generate these stars is with a noise texture. So click on the background, and we're going to Shift A noise texture, and a color ramp. And we're going to examine what each one of these things do to the background, but first let's plug in the noise texture into the color ramp, and then let's plug in the color ramp into the background color. Oops. There we go. Okay, so now we've got this hazy patchwork, and believe it or not, that's going to be stars in a second. So the first thing we want to do is we want to turn up the scale that these distortions are happening at by taking the scale here and bringing it up to 400. And we can see that the distortions are now on a much smaller scale, but they're not exactly very star looking, so we're going to achieve that by playing with the markers here. So you can see that the color distribution changes if I shift these markers around. And generally we want high contrast, and we want a lot of black and very little white. So we're going to increase the amount of black that we see here and decrease the amount of white and the space in between them. And basically, as far as I can tell, the space in between them kind of correlates to like the gradiency. I could be totally wrong though, but so you just want to pull them until you get a starry background that looks nice, and this already looks much better than what we had in the last video. And the nice thing about this is it's completely animatable, so it's already mapped to the sphere around you. So let's play with this until we get something we like. That's way too many stars. I think that looks pretty okay. It's just a matter, at this point, it's just a matter of playing with it until you get something that looks good. I'm going to stick with this for now. This still looks like there's too many stars, but, ooh, that's very nice. I like that a lot. Okay, sweet. So now we've got our starry background, and I'm going to render it quickly so you can see what it looks like. So you want to add a camera to the scene, Shift A, add camera. On your keyboard, do Control Alt and 0 on the number pad to switch to the camera view. Hit function F12 to render. And sorry if you can hear a little fan noise. Doing this on my laptop. Not the greatest idea. Alright. That's looking pretty good. We can turn up the contrast and compositing, but this already looks like a much better, more realistic sky than we had in the last video. So yay for improvement. Anyhow, now we're going to get into the biggest feature of the scene. So you've probably seen pictures, magnificent pictures of the Milky Way's arm arcing over a natural formation or a building of some sort. Maybe you wondered, how can I do that? Well, because there are so many pictures out there, it's actually pretty easy to just manipulate one into the scene. And we're going to do that all within Blender. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to add a plane. This is going to be our galaxy, so we want to scale it up pretty large. And now we're going to try to wrap it around the world so that it forms a half cylinder. That way we can stick the camera at the center and look around it. And no matter where we look, the galaxy arm will be there as if it was stretching across the sky. So the way we're going to do this is we're going to hit Tab, and we're going to, now that once we have everything selected, we're going to hit W and subdivide and do that a bunch of times. If you want to do it quicker, you can just hit W and then, you can just hit W, subdivide, and then T, and then scroll down here and you can change the number of cuts. But this works for me, so I'm going to stick with that. And now we're going to want to use orthographic mode on our number pad, so hit 5, and you want to switch to a view of the plane where it doesn't really look like it's there, it just looks like a line. So 1 or 3 will generally give you a good point of view there. And we want to click on Mesh, and we're going to go to Warp under Transform. Let's see. And now you see, if we hit T and pull up this toolbar, we see the warp angle, and play with that until you get a half cylinder. This is pretty good. I'm going to go all the way up to maybe 165. Perfect. Okay, so now you can see we've got this nice little half cylinder. That's actually way too long. So we're going to scale this on the Y a little bit, and this is looking pretty good. So scale this up a little more, check off smooth, and pop back out of orthographic view with 5 on your number pad. I'm going to hit T to get rid of this toolbar. And now we have to add the galaxy texture to this plane. So let's zoom underneath it so we can see what we're doing. And you want to hit Control-Alt-0 to get the camera view underneath it. That's very nice. And now here's a little trick. If you go into this right panel and pull it out a little bit, and you see this thing that says border, click that, and now the computer will only render what's inside the camera. This is a nice trick to save rendering, like processing power if you're on a weaker machine like this. Okay, let us start graphically putting the galaxy onto this plane. So once you have it selected, you can just right-click to select the plane, go back into the node editor, and if you see this cube at the bottom here, you want to click that, and now we'll be able to edit the material of the plane. So hit New to edit the material, and let's call it Milky Way, since that's what we're going to be adding. And now at this point, I'm going to include the textures that I use in this video down below. Whatever galaxy you want to use, you can just add it in. For now, I'm going to be using the Milky Way arm, the classic picture that you see. So the first thing we want to do is add the texture to the plane. So click on the diffuse shader and hit Control-T, or maybe Command-T. Do I not have Node Wrangler enabled? Alright, here's a tutorial on how to enable the Node Wrangler add-on. Go to File, User Preferences, Add-ons, type Node Wrangler. Oh, it is enabled. Whomst? Okay. Usually Command-T or something works, but... Okay. Ah, there we go. It was Control-T. What? Yeah, Control-T. Okay, so Control-T pops these 3 nodes into view. If you don't have the Node Wrangler add-on, you can just add the image texture, mapping, and texture coordinate nodes. And so we can see that UV is wrapped here, but since we're not really doing anything complicated with this plane, I'm going to switch it to generated. Plug the generated into the vector input on the mapping node. And let's see what it looks like. So now we are observing these stars through what is essentially a purple mesh because of this image texture, but we're going to change that real quick. So click Open, go to your galaxy texture, and I'm going to be using, let's see, textures. I'm going to be using this picture, which is a picture of the Milky Way galaxy arm. And we're going to change diffuse BDF, use Shift-S to change it to an emission shader. And ooh, isn't that just gorgeous? That looks pretty ugly, actually, because it's a little stretched out, so maybe we should UV unwrap this. So let's switch back to UV, and that's not going to show us anything. Hit Tab, and then W, not W, sorry, U for UV unwrap. That looks, oh, this is much better. Okay, so now we want to rotate it using this mapping node since we want it to stretch across the sky. So let's figure out which direction we need to rotate this on. My guess would be Z, but I'm probably wrong. Nope, I was correct. Okay, now let's change the scale so this looks a lot less hideous. There we go. Okay. Now I'm wondering why this looks so low res. Did I use a bad image? Oh, much better. Look how much higher res this is. So what these stars you're seeing behind are actually not from our stars. They are from the stars in the picture. And this is actually going to be a problem. So when we animate this thing, the stars are just going to cut off. So we need to figure out how to get rid of those stars. But right now, this is actually looking pretty decent. So let us... And by the way, you can play with the mapping on this to get the scale however you like. And it really just comes down to artistic taste. But now we're going to move on to removing the stars from around here using just the Blender node editor. So the first thing we want to do is we want to add a mix shader, plug the diffuse into that, and then we're going to add a transparent shader and also plug that into there. And now this thing is going to go partially transparent, which doesn't help us very much. But if we can tell it to be transparent everywhere that isn't the galaxy we want to see, then we can make these lines, which are super visible, fade away. So let's add an RGB to black white node, and let's take the image texture output and plug it into the color input there. And now we're going to take the output from the RGB black white node and plug it into the color ramp, like that. It's a handsome little node map. Okay. Boom. Alright, and now we're going to take the color ramp and plug it into the factor, and we're going to do Control-Shift-Click on the color ramp to let us see what it looks like from that point of view. So if you look at your screen now, if you look at your render port view now, you'll see that it's black and white, because that's what we're getting from here. And if we play with the sliders, we get varying degrees of black and white. So white right now tells the image where to be emitted, and black tells the image where to be transparent. So let's play with this so that just the galaxy is in white. And this will take the smallest bit of fidgeting. Ah, this is much better. Okay. Let's see. And you can see that there's still a couple stars around it that are less than transparent, but those will just blend in nicely. Okay, now we're getting somewhere. Okay, so this should work nicely, and now if we plug the mix shader into the material output, we should see, swap them. We can see that the boundaries are much less distinguishable. They're still like that cluster of stars, and this is purely going to come down to how much you want to play with these values here, and how much you want to experiment with using the various interpolation modes. And you can probably do a much better job than Blender can if you use GIMP, but this method has worked pretty well, and I played with it for about 10 to 15 minutes, and I got the result you saw at the beginning of the tutorial. So it can definitely be done. You just gotta spend a little time with it, tinker, have a little fun with it. You know. Okay. Yeah, that's looking alright. Okay, and now we're going to add another mix shader and plug the transparent shader into that one as well, so the whole image is a little more transparent. And I'm gonna play with the factor until it looks acceptable. I kind of like the way this is looking, and I'm actually going to also zoom out so we can sort of see how well this is coming. Okay, I'm kind of liking the way this looks. Alright. Yeah, again, a lot of this is going to come down to how much you want to play with the settings, because it's artistic license. Okay. Sweet. Yeah, this scaling is kind of funky too. Let's go fix that. Alright. Looks like it's a little compressed. And let's change its position to, oops, let's go negative 0.5. That's too far. 0.25. Okay. Okay. This still looks excessively stretched. I think that looks handsomer. Alright, that looks better. And you can play with the camera angle too to get the brightest parts of the galaxy in view. Much nicer. And that's how we're gonna animate. That's how you're gonna animate it later too. Okay, so now that we're done with that, we want to add a smaller galaxy. I'm just gonna add one to show you how the technique works, and it's essentially exactly the same as the adding the plane, adding the texture, picking which parts of the texture we want to be transparent. So let's add another plane, and we're going to place this plane. I'm going to put it in the upper left-hand corner-ish, and we're going to add the Milky Way texture and hit this little number next to it to make it an independent texture so we can edit it. And let's call it, let's rename it to Galaxy. I'm going to rename it to Small Galaxy. That's what it's going to be. Alright, and now there's a little, there is the tiniest black square somewhere up here, and that's where our texture is. Even though I guess technically it really should be glowing unless it's in the way. No. Oh, right, because we need to UV unwrap this. So once we UV unwrap this, we're going to get this hideous looking texture. There we go. Yeah, that looks gross. Okay. So let us change the texture to another galaxy texture. It doesn't matter what you choose, but I'm going to choose this one. It'd be nice if the whole galaxy is in the frame. And you can see already, because we spent a little bit of time setting up the transparency on this is already looking pretty good. Actually, I don't think I have anything I want to change about that. So you can pretty much add and change any galaxies you want in this method. And the nice thing is if you want to experiment with making procedural textures, which I'm going to make a video on in the future to make procedural galaxies, you can also use this technique. It all just comes down to messing with the transparency and changing which parts of the galaxy and stars you want visible. And this is very, very animatable. So you saw from my animation at the beginning that if you just pan the camera around, taking care to keep the boundaries of your galaxy hidden, it's not too hard to animate. And you can add and remove any galaxies that you want in this. You can move galaxies around. You can have galaxies get bigger or smaller as needed. I'm trying to make the second galaxy bigger, but I keep hitting the big one. So yeah, it's a really dynamic technique, and it's not too difficult, and the results are actually pretty decent. So I'm going to quickly render this, and then I'm going to show you just a couple of nodes we're going to add to the compositor to make the glare stand out and play with the color grading. So I'll see you back in a minute. And welcome back. The render has finished, and I'm going to take a minute or two to teach you some compositing stuff. So the way I made the galaxy right now doesn't look fantastic because it's going to come down to spending time fiddling with it and making sure the scale looks nice and playing with the mesh you're using. But this will serve as a decent enough example of how we can composite this. So let's switch into the compositor, and that's going to be in the window up here. Switch into compositing, and click Use Nodes. And we want to see what the render is looking like down here, so click on this little icon all the way in the bottom left corner. Ooh, wrong icon. The little picture icon right here, and select Render Results. And that'll give us a good indication of what we're looking at. And we have our nodes up here, and if you want, you can also render the output as a backdrop, that'd be pretty cool. So first thing we want to do, add glare. Glare, if used tastefully, can make a lot of things look more realistic. So you want to add some glare in, and right now it's not going to do anything because the threshold is very low. But change the streaks to fog glow, and we're going to change the threshold to 0 to see what happens when the whole thing is having glare added to it. And that looks pretty good. I like to have my glare in moderation, so I'll change the threshold to about 0.1, which I think looks pretty good. But in this case, 0 looks equally good. Now you want to add some color grading. So do a Shift A and do RGB curves. Now add it, and this will let you change the tone of the image, the feel. So right now we've got some red, and we've got some gray, and some purple and blue, and we can make the image more colorful and turning up the amount of color in the image by playing with this one. If you want to make the image feel colder, you can increase the amount of blue in the image. That makes the image feel a little more mystical. If you want to make the image feel more awe-inspiring and welcoming, you can turn up the red. That makes it a little more homely. And finally, if you want to just make it realistic, keep the values generally where they were, or even turn down the color a little bit. If you would like, it's not necessary for this scene since this is a space scene, but if you go to this panel over here and you click Color Management, and you switch the view to film or filmic, you can get an interesting color grading scale. So film makes it look a lot more like it was taken with like a Polaroid camera, and I find that setting is much more useful for scenes that have more physical objects. Like if you're doing like a sculpture render, or if you're making a render of a chess set or something. But it can look nice too if you're going for a little bit more of an artsy thing. I'm gonna personally keep it at default. And that's pretty much it. With this technique, you can add as many galaxies as you want. You can move them around. It's pretty customizable. And thank you for watching. If you have any comments about my tutorial style or what videos you'd like to see me make in the future, just add them in the comments below. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and stay tuned for more.